Hello, good morning. Welcome to Cutting Edges Sharpening. Starting off the day with a couple of kitchen knives. These are global G16 style knives, steel knives, Japanese. I don't know if you can see, but it's been hurt in the past. And there's a lot, I don't know if you got a glimpse of it there. It's a lot of chips and damage done to the edge of this knife. Most knives go through it. Some go through it worse than others. But anyway, we're going to start repairing this knife and get it back to shape again. So stay tuned. I'll clamp this in and we'll get it ready. Alright, so we got the first knife clamped into the Ruixin Pro Model 009 knife sharpening system I use. It's a guided knife sharpening system. And it's pretty much centered. The middle of the sharpening is going to happen here, so you want to have about the same distance because you have to swing the arm from side to side, sharpening all the way. Like such, using the diamond stones. So let's mark the cutting edge with a marker and then we'll get started. You know the blade needs help when you run your felt marker across to mark the cutting edge and it shreds your felt marker. There's a lot of chips. Now standard sharpening is done in such a fashion. The stone abrasively removes metal. Then you flip the knife over, do the other side. Same thing, until you get the apex to where you want it. Now the only problem with this is it's already got all these chips, so I'm going to end up removing a lot of metal on that edge and then flipping it over, removing a lot of metal on that edge to get past farther back in the knife to where there's no chips anymore. The alternate is to take this knife and run a stone across this edge here. And I use a flat plate diamond steel plate, and I'll show you that in a second. Run it back and forth until it removes that cutting edge. And then we start from scratch. You don't have any chips in it anymore. So let's get that and we'll get started. So here you'll see two of my diamond stone plates that I use. They're just inexpensive. They're like 16 bucks for the two of them. But what I do is I'll take the coarser 400 grit and I'll simply run it along the edge. That noise you hear is the diamonds removing the very apex of the blade. And while you're doing this, you're shaving off the steel, but you're trying to get the steel to go away so you can't see chips anymore. And if you do it in this fashion, sharpen this way with whatever system you're using, you have to remove all of that steel, or you can just do the very edge of it and get past those chips. Now we'll go to the finer stone. The reason I do it this way is because often these knives come to me at a really bad bevel angle. I'll get kitchen knives that are a 20, 22 degree bevel, which is great if you want longevity, but if you want something that's sharp, I would go between 14 degrees and 17 degrees. So if you have a 20 degree bevel tapered down to the apex, you're going to be removing a lot of steel before you get there. So if you restart, often you'll get hunting knives that are too fine an edge on them as well, and you want to put it back to like a 20 to 22 degree. Well, then you're removing all kinds of steel to get it back to that edge. If you can hear now, there's very little steel being grabbed anymore. This is just trying to refine those chips that were there, take them out completely. Are there other ways of doing the same process? Yeah, this is what I do and it works for me. These are sacrificial diamond plates. They don't mean anything to me. Having said that, always be careful when you're doing this, because if your finger touches that edge, it's probably still sharp enough to cut you. Anyway, I'll get this cleaned up and we'll get back at the next step. Stay tuned. One technique I found to make sure you've removed everything in, You can take your thumbnail and run it along slowly, carefully. And your thumbnail will feel anything. As much as you won't believe it, you can feel every little nick in there. And if you don't want to do that, take a Q-tip. Everybody's got one. If you don't have them, you probably can't hear me anyway. Just run the Q-tip along the edge, and it'll remove part of that Q-tip wherever there's a notch, wherever there's a nick. It'll grab that Q-tip. Do a light pass first, and then a little progressively harder. You'll also, if there's a chip, you will probably feel it through this as well. Anyway, okay, we've cleared that off. Now we can start the sharpening process. Stay tuned. These are the stones that I use with my Ruixin sharpening system. I 3D printed this case because I got tired of having these just laying around loose. So message me, mail me, whatever you want. If you want to find out where to get these, or if you want me to mail you one, let me know. But anyway, I'm going to start with an 80 grit. Now, I've had these stones for a little over a year now. The company says you can use them dry, and you can. You'll use them and you'll sharpen a knife. You'll sharpen several knives, and then you'll notice this happening along the edge here. Because a dry knife, steel on steel, diamonds on steel like this edge will chip some of these stones up. These diamonds, well, I call them stones, but they're not stones, they're diamond chips. So if you put that in the machine, locks in there, clamps in the back here. You can adjust the position, left to right. Then what I use is Hops honing oil because it's unscented and it's pretty easy to wash out. It lubricates. Put a little bit on there. And this is going to extend the life of your stones a long, long time. I did it factory-wise. They lasted, I don't know, half a dozen knives, and then it was, okay, now I've got to order new stones again. So I decided to put some oil on, see what happened, and it cuts like crazy, lasts a lot longer. Anyway, here's the process. I have altered the design of this system. It came very well, but there was a couple things that could have been a little upgraded, so I've done that. Anyway, if you want to find out how that works and how to use it, look at my other videos. Anyway, I prefer to draw back, away from the knife, as opposed to pushing forward. It works both ways because the diamond stones don't really care which way you sharpen, left, push or pull. But this is a lot safer. What I've done is I've put a lock on the back here with a spring, so I can't pull this stone past the front of this blade, because what happens is you'll get it and you'll hammer this against the edge of your blade. Well, now you're starting from scratch again. So every time I do a knife, I just adjust how far I can bring it out. That's where I want it. So I'll cinch it in a little bit, and then I go. Now it might look like I'm sawing, but I'm just pushing it forward, letting it ride freely while I'm pushing it forward, and then I do the cutting edge on the drawback. It's just a safety thing that I can't help but utilize. If you look at the felt marker, you'll see that I'm removing all of that felt marker from the very apex along here to the back shoulder, which I call this edge back here, the shoulder. As you're going along, give it a few pulls, and you'll see how shiny it is. Now, there's already a nice burr there. You can adjust the angle here, and I can go through that on a video for you if you want. I've already done it off screen, so it takes up less camera time, but let's get them done here. I can turn this thing to reach the very edge. Sometimes if you have it centered here, it'll bind. You can't bring it back far enough, but if you turn it, you can bring it back. I have it sitting on this lock here, so we can pivot without going up or down, changing the angle. I don't know if you can hear a difference. I've used up the oil that was on there, on the stone, and it's still on the blade. But when I get to the unoiled part, it gets real hard on this diamond stone. And like I said, this stone has lasted me over a year, and it's an 80 grit. So you would think it would remove the diamonds really quickly, but holds up pretty good. The tip might be a little different angle because of the thickness of the steel, so give it a little more attention. Make sure you've got the full felt marker removed, and you can go along and you can probably pick that up on camera. That's the burr. That's metal from this side being pulled and left hanging over the other edge, on the other side, which has to be removed when you do the other side. I don't know if there's a right or wrong. What I like to do on a heavy, when I'm removing or reprofiling, I'll sit here and do this 20 times in one spot to remove all the steel that I need to remove. But I'll typically start and do up to about 5 strokes per spot. But remember to utilize the whole stone, because you will wear out these diamonds here faster than on the ends. You'll notice also, as you change directions, you'll notice a tone difference in the grinding action. And that's because you're going over what you've already ground, and you're changing the location of those scratches. See, to me that is plenty sharp. I will just advance to the next stone after. And this is the beauty here. You lock it up. You let her hang. You pull it out. You flip it over. Now the angle you're sharpening on this side is exactly the same as the one on the other side. Don't forget to unlock that then. I haven't felt markered this side. I don't have to, because I did the other side. Everything was set up and calibrated properly. I can simply start to do the same thing on this side. So I'll pause while I do this, and then we'll switch to the next stone. So I've done some grinding on this with this stone already, and visually it looks like I've got everything where it should be, but I can't feel a burr. So I look through my magnifying lens. Yes. When I look through a magnifying lens, I can see that the very apex of this has still got a shiny spot, which means I'm still cutting steel from the back here. I haven't got all the way to the apex yet. I don't know if that's coming through or not, but it's kind of, I can't have the camera mounted on a base and zoom in at the same time without moving everything out of whack. So anyway, I'll keep going until I can feel the burr. All right, we're back. I succeeded on the other side. I grabbed the 200 grit stone. The number is washed off, but I know what it is. It's the exact same process with this stone. Lubricate it. It helps, the oil helps the diamonds and particles of steel that the grinding removes from the knife. Helps carry it away from the edges of the diamonds that you're wanting to use. And you can give it a wipe and pull all that off nice and easy. Now, the first stone did all the reprofiling. It took off all the major steel. This one's going to, basically his job of this stone and all the following stones is to remove the scratches the other one just did. So the first stone at 80 grit was pretty violent on the steel. Makes a lot of deep gouges. Well, by deep gouges you probably can't hardly see them, but if you're listening, you can hear this 200 grit stone is refining those scratches. And when you get all the scratches removed, you're going to end up with a really, really shiny cutting edge. So we spend the time to go through the process of changing up stones. Not that it's realistically, after I was done with the first stone at 80 grit, there's nothing this knife wouldn't cut. But as you progress through the stones, you get a much nicer, finer finish. And you can do things a little slicier. Like you can shave tomatoes really nice. The sharper you get. This gray you see here is not the oil. Well, it's the oil, but it's carrying the metal that you've lifted from the other side. You can feel a burr pretty good there. When you change stones, always remove this oil, because if you're using a 200 grit stone, you're going to have 200 grit size particles there. And when you go to a finer stone, you're going to drag those particles back across that cutting edge, which is kind of counterproductive because you're trying to get finer, which removes marks from the previous stone. But if you leave that oil and that abrasive that is left behind with the oil, you're just doing the same sharpening over again. Spend a little time, be careful at the edge, the very point. You want to be precise as well. You can put more pressure on the stones depending whether you need it or not. That you'll learn by doing. I prefer to do customers' knives on this guided sharpening system as opposed to all my whetstones. My own knives I do in whetstones because I like the process. I get a nice sharp edge on them. But customers' knives are not always symmetrically sharpened from whoever did it last time, and you often get really ugly apex, because you can have one side of the knife sharpened to 20 degrees and you flip it over, do it to 14 degrees. Now if you do that by hand, that can be the case, but when you're doing it by a guided system, you can't make that mistake because it holds it exactly the same. So now I'm going up to a 400 grit stone. I'm going to do the same process, and that's how the rest of the show goes. I'm just doing the same thing with a finer grit stone and a finer grit stone until I get to where I'm happy. Now, in these stones, I have up to, I think it is 3000 grit diamond, and that's what I'll use. After that, I go with a stropping motion to do the refining. Just grabbing my other can oil here. It's just my Canadian Tire brand of oil, 3-in-1. I use it on here as well because it's clear. It has no odor. And I can use it on almost everything else at home as well as my sharpening system. So, like I said before, continue the process, just switching stones. So I'll do this stone and then I'll get back to you. I don't always, but I'm going to go to a 600 grit stone now. When I say stone, there's nothing stone about it. It's all diamond. But it's the terminology. I'm going to do this knife now in a 600 grit. I've wiped off the junk. And this one I'm going to do a little finer, just longer drawing back strokes. This helps to level out the grinding marks that you've left behind, sharpening marks. When you spend more time in one spot than another, you can create a bit of a hollow spot, so just be mindful of that and clean it up. I don't know if you can see the marks there. That's where it's cut in a little more, removing heavier movement of steel. That happens in every process. It will come off. When I say draw back from tip to tail, is what happens is because the device has a little bit of flex to it. Often what you'll find out is you're touching just the apex, but not the shoulder back here. because this thing is in effect bowing a little bit. So if you do a full draw, it's completely being touched from the apex all the way back to the shoulder. And that's what you're looking for. Make sure you've got everything at the proper bevel angle. Okay, we'll flip it over to the other side. I do not have a studio, so this is my workshop. I do this 24/7 almost, it feels like. I just thought I've got a lot of questions from people that follow me on the interwebs, asking the process and how to do it and can they do it. And yeah, you can buy this kit. I sell these kits. I don't have an affiliation with anybody. I've paid for this all by myself out of my own pocket. It's the best system I can find for the money. A set of stones costs me about 26 bucks. And that's typically 6 stones from 120 grit to about 1,000 or 1,500 grit. And honestly, 1,500 grit is already overkill as far as making a blade look pretty goes. And if you watch this to the end, I'm going to show you a tip on how to make the edge look just mirror finish that I have not seen anyone touch on the internet. I watch a lot of videos. When you get down to this, you're at the 600 grit blade now. You're leaving a burr. You're dragging steel from one side to the other. So what I'll do, when I'm done the sharpening part of this, I'll flip it back and forth. Do a couple quick, very light passes. That helps remove the bulky burr that you've been creating and leaving behind. As I mentioned before, you'll see the color is, well, here, paper towel will show you. Don't do this, it's very hard on the thumb. But that's metal that's been removed. That's not diamond stuff. You're not going to find any diamond stuff in here. Other side, same thing. The oil is clear, so it's not the oil. What you're doing is you're removing steel. And that's got to go somewhere. You hear that? That is the burr waiting to be taken off. But we're not done yet. We're going to go to another stone, so hang on. We'll be right back. Alright, so as you can see, we've got a fairly fresh 1,000 grit stone. These almost never wear out because they're so fine. This is going to be the finished stone that I use on this. I can go up to a 3,000 grit stone. Most knives don't require it. This is a very well used kitchen knife, and it's, in my opinion, just as valuable as any other knife. However, it's a workhorse. It's not a $500 or $1,000 kitchen knife that needs to look like someone spent a fortune to have it sharpened. Having said that, when you see this edge when I'm done, if you're not impressed or you wouldn't be happy with it, then I think we're on the wrong page. The finer the grit you go to, you'll notice that I have to do less passes because the process goes a lot faster once you've removed all of the big ugly stuff that you wanted to remove. The heavier grit stones remove the steel faster. The fine stones don't remove a lot of steel. What they're designed to do is just remove the scratches. So we'll do the other side, and then I'll show you one trick to help you get a really fantastic finish. Okay, so using the same stone, the 1,000 grit stone here, what you've been watching me do is you've been watching me sharpen like this, because you can concentrate pressure on a spot to do the work, right? What no one shows you, no one tells you, I have not found anyone on the internet that does this. Just remove the debris from the stone, give it a fresh oiling, clean the blade off. And I found this out simply by accident. And now I do every knife this way. And the process is very simple. side to side. Even making scratches this way the whole time. This goes across those scratches in the opposite direction, removing them, refining them, and making them shiny. So you pull the stone all the way out, because as you're doing this, you're going to be touching the shoulder as opposed to touching the apex. So what I do is I pull the stone out, do a pass or two back and forth, lift it, put it back down, do it again. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's picking up metal that going this direction wasn't taking out. Because what you're doing is you're running a stone on the very edge of a scratch going this way. Well, that's fine if you sit there and polish it. But when you go this way, it takes the tops off those scratches. And you're going to see a vast improvement in what your knives look like. Get the very edge of this as close as you can without touching this steel plate to the edge of the blade, which just undoes everything you did. Listen to it. See it? You even move the stone out of the way on the way by here. So there's obviously a nick somewhere in there that never got completely removed. But you do this, you notice the black, it's still removing steel. So I'm going to flip it over, do the other side like this, meticulously, and then I'll take the knife out and I'll show you what it looks like before we strop it. Be right back. I don't know if this camera will pick it up, but that has a very, very nice polished edge finish on it. You can see the debris on the apex from me wiping it off. There's a huge burr on here right now. And if you don't remove that burr, it's going to feel sharp for the first couple minutes. And then all of a sudden your knife's going to be dull. And you're not going to know what kind of sharpening job did you do. All you've done is use the burr to sharpen, to cut with, and you broke it off. You never actually sharpened the apex because you didn't remove all the burr before you did the stropping. The more you can remove before you do the stropping, the better. So let's get to stropping. Just drop everything on the floor. This is my simple, inexpensive strop. I have one on the wall here. It's a big belt that I use, but this fits in the camera easier. What you want to do, try and match the same angle you did the sharpening at. And this one, it was between 14 and 17. I don't remember what the number was now, but it's about there. And you just simply try as best as you can to hold the knife at the same angle on both sides. This is a coarse side with a polishing compound on it, which helps grab and remove the burr. Also polishes that edge. I'll do this a handful of times on this side to remove the bulk of the burr. And you can see it's grinding along here on these sides. See how it's changed colors? Those are the only two spots that are touching anymore. One side that has the burr folded over, because it only sticks to one side at a time, you'll notice you'll scratch, like right there. You see the scratches coming in there? That's because the burr is on this side. And it's still hanging on. And there's nothing wrong with running a few passes. Basically what you're doing is trying to break the burr off like you would a pop can lid. Rock it back and forth. This is a medium compound that I'm using on the strop, which will help cut off the break off, I guess. The burr, sorry. Take a look and see how it's looking. I don't know if you can see it through here or not. Anyway, the burr is not visible in a magnifying glass anymore. It's only a 10 power, so it's not the greatest. Go to the other side. This side doesn't have polish. Well, I didn't apply polish. as you're sharpening from here, the edge of your blade picks up the polish and holds onto it. And then I come to this side, because it's the finer side, and it'll remove that polish and it sticks to the leather. This side I'll spend a little more. I'll probably do a dozen passes each direction. So 1, 2, up to 10 or 12. What you're doing is shining up the very, very edge, the apex of the blade itself. The more time you spend on this, in my opinion, the better. As long as you don't get the angle wrong. If you sharpen it at 15 degrees and then you come here at like 20 degrees, you're just going to round off your apex. You're going to ruin your knife. You'll have to start all over again. So less angle is better than more angle. Start with less. If you don't feel that burr, increase it just a little bit until you feel, yeah, it's cutting right along that apex. And if it's not your knife, it's not the end of the world if you have to touch it up again. You just take your 800 grit or even 1000 grit stone, just retouch your blade, and it'll put that apex right back where it belongs. You can get, and I do have, a stone like these stones here, but in a leather strop. So you do the stropping with this machine as well. I have pretty much used that up to no longer be in existence. Because it's only 1 inch wide, 6 inches long, like the stones, you're putting all that force and all that work on a very, very small area. I'll show you my preferred strop right now. Stay there. Can I stay there? Yeah. Now when I go around to markets and I'm doing in bulk, this is the strop I use. It's reminiscent of an old cutthroat razor sharpening belt. And you can see here the use and wear it's had as well. This is a fantastic strop. It's far superior to the stick in my opinion. But in the shop here it's handy as well, that when you're trying to do something on camera, it becomes mute. Anyway, this knife has been done now. So what I like to do is drop everything. Take this knife, I'll put it on here, and hold about the same angle on a few layers of paper towel, and just ever so slightly pull it back. And you see what's leaving behind there? It's picking up some of the polish that was left on the blade. And if you look and you see it in clumps, just take your paper towel, set it flat, and then bring it up just a little bit, and just rock it back and forth a little bit. If you don't get that polish off there, you don't have a sharp knife. Because it's cutting right through the paper towel there. Just make sure there's no polish. There's a little bit of polish stuck right in there. Kind of pull it away from the edge, not toward it, obviously, because things will come apart then. Fingers and so on. See the polish stuck on the edge here? Well, that could be felt marker there. Another thing I do after this process is I take rubbing alcohol, clean it all off, simply because I put a lot of oil on it. And there's felt marker. Anyway, that looks very nice and clean now. Now everybody typically wants to see, will it cut paper? To me it's kind of a pointless thing, because I can take a butter knife, spend like 2 minutes on it, and make it cut paper. But if you need a visualization, there's that. And flyers are probably the worst manufactured paper in the world to do this with, because it's just pure crap. But a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, again, you can get a chainsaw to cut through that stuff. It's so thick and bulky. But there you go, there you have it. Now, will it shave? I don't have really any hairs left on my arm, but those that were there are now going away. You can see them. I don't know if the camera's picking them up, falling off there. But yeah, there's all my hair's gone. I don't want to leave my follicles on there. This is an alcohol-soaked paper towel. I don't even know what the Rockwell hardness is of the steel. I'm going to look it up, let you know what it is. This G16, I think, is referring to the steel that's used. We'll take a look. I'll get back to you in a second here. Alright, so I went and did an internet search on this. The G16 model. It's a Chromova 18 steel, which means it's 18% chromium built into this knife, which makes it a stainless steel knife. So it will not rust. Water will sit on here, and if you leave it, it will corrode, but it just wipes off. It's not actually corroding into the steel. High carbon steel, like standard Japanese knives, are high carbon steel. You cut an onion with that and you sit it on the counter, and 10 minutes later it's rusting. But they're incredibly hard steel. This has 1% carbon steel built into it, which makes it a fairly durable, sturdy knife, which makes this edge brittle, but very, very easy to sharpen, easy to work on. And as you've seen, it's a razor blade. I think I have this set at 17 degrees, which is typical for what I'll do for kitchen knives. My own kitchen knives I set to 14 degrees. But as you can see, even this crappy sales paper just slices right away. So anyway, that's this knife. I looked online, is $120. So the Global is a pretty decent company. They're not the most expensive, but they're definitely not junk knives. I really enjoy sharpening knives with carbon in the steel. The cheap kitchen knives you get won't have a very high carbon, if any carbon, in the steel at all. And they don't last very long. And they're also very springy. Kind of like a fillet knife. A fillet knife is typically very low carbon steel because it's got to be flexible, right? Anyway, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop me a note. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.